Welcome to Never Again is Now, a podcast about anti-Semitism. I'm Evelyn Marcus, and in addition to being a psychologist, I'm featured in the documentary about anti-Semitism, Never Again is Now. I'm a Dutch Jew and a daughter of Holocaust survivors. In 2006, I immigrated to the United States because of the rising anti-Semitism in Europe.
I am Phyllis Zembler-Miller, the founder of the free nonfiction Holocaust theater project, Thin Edge of the Wedge. I grew up in a small town in the Midwest where it was not a Holocaust survivor community. Our grandparents had come and parents had come from Russia and Poland at the turn of the previous century to flee the Tsar. Yet, in 1970, only 25 years after the end of World War II, my US Army officer husband and I were stationed in Munich, Germany, and this experience changed our lives forever.
In today's episode, we are discussing two topics: anti-Semitism in Greece and the role of the World Jewish Congress in combating anti-Semitism. Our guest today is Leon Saltiel. Leon Saltiel has a Ph.D. in contemporary European history from the University of Macedonia in Thessaloniki, Greece. His book, The Holocaust in Thessaloniki, was the winner of the 2021 Vashem International Book Prize for Holocaust Research. He is the World Jewish Congress's representative at the United Nations in Geneva and at UNESCO, and the coordinator of countering anti-Semitism. Leon, thank you for coming on our show. Welcome.
Thank you. It's a great honor and pleasure. Thank you so much.
I get to ask the first question. Could you share with us your personal connection to Holocaust in Thessaloniki and your interest in combating anti-Semitism?
Thank you. I mean, both of these topics are, of course, connected. I come from a family of Holocaust survivors. My grandparents survived the Holocaust in Greece, hiding in the country when the majority of their families were deported and exterminated at Auschwitz in 1943. So for me, growing up in Thessaloniki, Thessaloniki was a major Jewish center where at the turn of the century, of last century, the Jews constituted the majority of the city's population. So it's one of the, maybe the only major city in Europe with a majority Jewish population. And that really marked the history and development of the city for many centuries. And growing up in the city and knowing that illustrious history, but also the void and the absence of the Jews, and not only the physical absence, but also their absence in buildings, in sights, in sounds, in recipes, in everything. Like with the Holocaust, not only at the physical extermination of the Jews, but also the complete destruction of their presence and memory. So I started to look into what actually happened during the war in the city, and this became into a Ph.D. That the outcome was the book The Holocaust in Thessaloniki, which, as you said, won the 2021 Yad Vashem Prize. And I tried to see what was happening in the city during the anti-Jewish measures of the Nazis. How were the city institutions responding, and how were the citizens of the city living the Holocaust? What was the impact of the Holocaust to the everyday life of the city? And to my, I mean, not that I was not surprised with my findings, but I found mostly indifference and even sometimes complicity in the destruction of the Jews. And everybody knew more or less what was happening. The Holocaust didn't happen in a faraway corner. It didn't happen at night. It didn't happen in the woods. It happened downtown, in the city center, in daylight, in front of their neighbors. So, and you know, when I did my PhD, it was the first ever PhD in a Greek university on the subject of the Holocaust in Greece. And on purpose, I did it in a Greek university because I don't think that the Holocaust is something that it relates to some other people. It happened in Thessaloniki. It's part of Greek history. It's part of European history. So I wanted to put it in the framework of modern Greek and modern European history. So that was something that I did, and chose to do it in Greece, in my native tongue, in the university of my native town. And somehow this connects to the other half of your question about my work currently here in Geneva, which is driven a lot by this experience of me growing up and these findings of my academic research. I work a lot about countering anti-Semitism internationally and creating norms and standards on this that we can discuss later, but also safeguarding the memory of the Holocaust. And it could be an academic interest that triggered it, but for me, this issue is not academic. We see the rise of anti-Semitism around the world. We see the decrease of the memory of the Holocaust. And this, again, it's not something that only affects the Jews. We see many demonstrations against the COVID-19 measures. People wear the yellow star or deny the Holocaust or compare themselves to Anne Frank, or we see Jewish anti-Semitic conspiracy myths emerging of the Jews having invented the virus or profiting from the virus or what have you. So these things don't only affect the Jews. This is not only anti-Semitism directed against the Jews. It's directed against our democracies, the rule of law, peaceful coexistence, and the cohesion of our societies. And governments now do start to understand this. They understand that anti-Semitism is threatening the state, the rule of law, democracy, and they're trying to act. So for me, this is where I see myself active in trying to fight anti-Semitism and promote safeguard the memory of the Holocaust as a way of building peaceful and cohesive and societies where coexistence and exchange happen between everybody, no matter their origin, belief, etc., particularities, and without any fear whatsoever.
And Leon, is there a family connection to the Holocaust?
Yes, as I said, all my grandparents were victims, were survivors of the Holocaust in hiding, but all of their families were deported and exterminated in Auschwitz.
Right. And I think about 95% of the Jewish community in Thessaloniki was killed, right? Was murdered.
Exactly. So really, my family story is really the exception of history rather than the rule. The rule was arrest, deportation, extermination. My family, like my 4 grandparents, were among the rare exceptions to be able to escape somehow and survive the war in hiding in Greece.
Incredible. Yeah. Can you please describe to us what the role is of the World Jewish Congress in combating anti-Semitism? So
thank you again for this question and the opportunity to present the role of the World Jewish Congress. First of all, it's important to highlight, to explain what the World Jewish Congress is. So we are an umbrella organization representing more than 100 Jewish communities around the world. So in a certain way, we're the federation of the Jewish communities, the International Federation of Jewish Communities, and we represent them at the international level. The World Jewish Congress was founded in 1936 here in Geneva and has a very illustrious history in advocating for the rights of Jews, back in the 30s and 40s, trying to assist the Jews during the Holocaust and to inform the world. You may have heard of the Gerhard Riegner telegram, which was the first information to reach the West about the existence of gas chambers that was sent by Gerhard Riegner, who was the representative of the World Jewish Congress at the time in Geneva. And since in the post-war era, our work on reparations, the Swiss bank accounts, the whole Waldheim affair, etc., etc. So this is where we come from, and we represent the Jewish communities at the international level. We are not working, let's say, on the local level, because of course this is the work of the communities, but at the same time we do help them and we do assist them in doing their work locally. So that's one of our big areas of work. in particular, let's say in my field of work, a lot is in the international level. It's standard setting and norm setting, meaning I cannot go to every Ministry of Education and tell them how to teach the Holocaust, but I can work and create guidelines about how Holocaust education should take place in, let's say, in different schools. So how do we do that? How do we try to have an impact on the local level? First, we can, and of course, I should say that fighting anti-Semitism and safeguarding the memory of the Holocaust are two main big priorities of the World Jewish Congress today. So first, we conduct a lot of diplomatic outreach. Daily and weekly, I meet dozens of ambassadors and diplomats. So we try to engage with them, explain our issues to them, our priorities, and work with them, identify synergies and projects we can partner. I'll give you some examples. UNESCO, which is the primary international organization with focus on education, we have signed a memorandum of understanding with them, and we work very closely on developing educational material, both on fighting anti-Semitism, but also how to teach about the Holocaust. And now, for example, we're also working on a report with them about online Holocaust denial and distortion, prepared by the University of Oxford. So we work with them to highlight and to create the material that will be used then by governments and the local institutions to teach about anti-Semitism and the Holocaust. Together with UNESCO, we also have developed a website called aboutholocaust.org that I invite all of your listeners to visit, which provides simple answers to basic questions about the Holocaust. This is done in an effort to counter Holocaust denial and distortion and ignorance, and provide simple answers to questions that many people have around the world, but maybe have difficulty finding when they have to look into, let's say, a longer article. It's from authoritative sources in partnership with the United States Holocaust Memorial Museum and other credible institutions. And it's now available in around, I believe now, 18 languages. And what is unique about this website is not only has been developed in partnership with UNESCO, which gives it also international credibility, but lately it has been integrated now with Facebook, Instagram, and TikTok. So whoever of these users of these social media companies searches any term related to the Holocaust, a box will appear inviting them to visit this website and get the information they want. So in this way, we can reach out to a lot of young people around the world who don't necessarily know, and they hear all these things without being able to find the right answers. But with this platform, they can go, they can find the answers they want, and they can also share very easily these things on Facebook when or at the school project, or when they speak to their teams, to their classmates, etc., etc. So that's another thing we have worked, and it's advancing very well. You may have also seen our campaign on Holocaust remembrance, which we do around the Holocaust Remembrance Day. We remember, and people take a sign and they take a picture, and it's being also distributed all across social media, and we get very, very big visibility. And this year we started illuminate buildings, and we had, I believe, more than 100 buildings in dozens of countries that were illuminated around Holocaust Remembrance Day, also as a way of increasing awareness. We work with the Organization for the Security and Cooperation in Europe to train governments and police officials about the security needs of Jewish communities around the world, but also on issues around online hate on the internet, how Jewish communities can report online hate to social media platforms. We work with European Union institutions to sensitize them about the need to prioritize the fight against anti-Semitism, and we're very happy that they have to work with them on their newly released a strategy against anti-Semitism last year, and I know you have hosted Katarina Voschnurbein in your program as well, and we work very closely with her to assist her and to bring also on board the voice of the Jewish communities.
So your impact is really at the top level of societies, right? The top governmental level of societies.
Exactly.
Not so much at the grassroots level, although your website can be used at your website with knowledge about the Holocaust can be used at the grassroots level as well. Correct?
Correct. This observation is correct. I mean, as I said initially, we represent the Jewish people at the international level.
Yeah.
We leave all the ownership and the local initiatives to the communities.
Yeah.
At the same time, we facilitate them, we provide them with information, with training, with contacts. We bring the voice to the United Nations, so also serve as a bridge of the local reality to the international level. Okay. But you're right to say that the majority of our work is, let's say, top-bottom rather than bottom-up.
Okay, thank you.
So with that huge umbrella of initiatives, which are your own personal, what's the top of your day-to-day list? Can you give us kind of a picture of what you do to fight anti-Semitism? Yes,
so I'm based here in Geneva, and my primary interlocutors are the UN diplomatic missions, as well as all the UN agencies that are based here. So a big part of what we do is to try to raise awareness, to build partnerships, and to become a stakeholder in everything that's happening in the city. I'll give you also a few examples. First of all, today we held a training on issues around the Holocaust, the memory of the Holocaust and anti-Semitism, together with the UN Holocaust Program and UNESCO, for all diplomats posted in New York, Geneva, and Paris. We had more than 100 participants. These are diplomats posted in the 3 main UN cities, from all regions of the world and all religious groups. So it was really an amazing outreach where for 2 hours they sat and listened and got information about why the knowledge about the Holocaust is relevant for their work at the UN today. Last September, at the session of the Human Rights Council, we spearheaded a joint statement together with Austria, Czech Republic, and Slovakia, signed by 53 countries. The first ever time that so many countries co-sign a statement on the need to fight anti-Semitism internationally. So again, we work to build coalitions and bring awareness, raise awareness about the issue. We're very active on interfaith dialogue. So we work here in Geneva, we have many umbrella organizations like the World Council of Churches or the Muslim World League. So work with them together to see how we can promote and protect human rights and build partnerships and dialogue. Something that your audience may know is that here in Geneva, we have the Human Rights Council, which can be a platform for good, but also it's a platform where also Israel is often singled out and biased reports come out. And you may know of the notorious item 7 on the agenda of the Human Rights Council, which is a permanent agenda item against Israel. So we are also trying to work to explain with diplomatic missions why this is bad and see how we can diminish a lot of this bias against Israel. So it's really varied, it's complex, it's difficult, but at the same time we make progress. So it's an important fight.
Leon, it's not a secret that the Organization of Islamic Countries is forming a bloc for Palestinians against Israel. That's how they see it, and that a lot of those countries have anti-Semitic policies in general. So, do you feel that your interfaith outreach to those representatives in the United Nations has any effect?
Well, we do have an effect. I'll give you, I mean, of course, everything we do at the UN is incremental. We're not going to go from 1 to 100, in one day. We're building up contacts, events, statements, as I described some of these initiatives. We were invited to speak at an event organized by the Islamic group last week, and we made a statement about the priorities of the Jewish world and the fight against anti-Semitism. We're invited to conferences organized by Muslim countries or in the Muslim world, and we attend those conferences. At the last meeting of the Human Rights Council, I had the honor to deliver a statement on behalf of the WJC and the Muslim World League, the first ever joint statement between a major Muslim and Jewish group, where we both pledged to work together to promote human rights around the world. Last year, we held a joint Ramadan dinner, a joint Ramadan interfaith dinner, where Jewish and Muslim leaders took the floor to share good wishes to one another. And hopefully, if there are no COVID restrictions this time around, we can do it physically in April. So, you know, we see goodwill. We do a lot of public things. It's not hidden anymore. It's public. We are there. We express our views. We talk to a lot of Muslim countries. We talk to Arab countries. I'm meeting Arab ambassadors and Muslim ambassadors throughout my work here. And I think you see things are changing. And while I recognize some of the shortcomings, we're working to build more partnerships and more goodwill. And I think that's what we have to do. There's no alternative. There's no alternative.
All right. Do you personally experience or observe any anti-Semitism in your work?
I'm happy to say I don't. I mean, we live in Geneva, which has quite a spirit of openness and inclusiveness. And so there is, you know, here in the international Geneva, you don't really see open expressions of let's say, of hate or of anti-Semitism. But I haven't, you know, I'm pretty vocal, I'm pretty active on social media. I've written books, I give interviews, and I haven't experienced, let's say, firsthand. Of course, I'm identified as the Jew, you know, wherever I go, and maybe people, I don't know, ignore me or they don't pay attention to me because of that. But it's not like they will come and express to me openly anything anti-Semitic. And of course, I mentioned my work in Greece, and I do speak out a lot about the Holocaust in Greece or about anti-Semitism in Greece. Happy to discuss more with you. And there again, I don't really receive a lot of anti-Semitism. Maybe because I don't live there, maybe because with COVID everything was online. But I'm happy to say that I'm exempt from a lot of these nuances, if I may say it so politely. Of course, growing up in Greece, I did face anti-Semitism, or at least, let's say, ignorance at school or during my military service or at the university.
That's what I want to talk to you about. Anti-Semitism in Greece today, but you can also talk about your own experience and whether it's changed, gotten more since you were a young person, or go ahead.
Yes, so yes, I mean, there was, if you may have seen, you know, ADL had a survey in 100 countries a few years ago. And Greece ranked as the most anti-Semitic country, definitely in Europe. I think it was after Iran or something. Wow. So it was almost, I believe, if I remember correctly, 70%, which was very high. Like 70% of Greeks today embrace anti-Semitic opinions.
More than Iran, yeah.
Yeah, it could be even more than Iran. Correct. I don't remember. So we had done a study that was part of around the same time, and we found almost similar results. I believe that was around 2015, 16, if I remember correctly. So indeed, we found widespread ignorance and often anti-Semitism expressed in Greece, which it's vocal, it's oral, it's not physical, meaning there are not so many physical attacks against individual Jews. There are some attacks against, let's say, Holocaust monuments or Jewish cemeteries or synagogues, but the majority is verbal. And it's sort of like myths and conspiracies and ignorance all bundled together with sort of like anti-Semitism, which it comes from historic reasons or from the church. And also we found, interestingly enough, it comes from a sense of victimhood of the Greek people, which means that anti-Semitism is related to some kind of, let's say, jealousy towards the Jews. I'm happy to say that these things are changing, that the Greek government now has really taken on board a lot of these issues. Greece is currently chairing the International Holocaust Remembrance Alliance, or IRA, and I'm sure you have heard of the IRA definition of antisemitism.
Yes, we
So
carry
Greece is now among the leaders in this fight. They are very close with Israel, as you know, also strategically. Holocaust education now has come to many schools with many projects. The media is a lot more now changing their attitude, and they educate the public about these important topics. And I'm very happy to say I see it from the impact of my work. I was in Berlin last week for the international premiere of a movie which uses some of my findings in my research, and it was done by two young Greek movie directors, and they speak about the Holocaust experience in Thessaloniki, in Greece.
What's the name of, please tell us the name of the movie.
Yes, the movie is called The City and the City, and it was the international premiere was in the Berlinale last week, and it will be featured in film festivals around the world. So, and I see a lot of these things happening, which is very positive to see that the Holocaust now and anti-Semitism are not a taboo issue anymore. We're going beyond being a taboo. It's becoming now a part of pop culture. It's becoming the media. It's on television. It's in schools. It's in public events. Politicians speak about it. They tweet about it. They write articles about it.
In Greece,
right? In Greece, everything is in Greece. Yes. You know, one of my publications, which is more or less an offshoot of my PhD, is a book of letters sent by 3 Jewish mothers from the ghetto. So 2 years ago, this was turned into a documentary where the president of Greece participated and read some of these letters, and you know, she's crying towards the end when she's reading those letters. So I don't think the president of Greece would ever participate in something like this 20 years ago, but they did 2 years ago, and now it's commonplace that Greek politicians are speaking about it, are participating in events. So it's all very good and positive, and we hope that this will continue.
Yes, that's great. That's great. Great to hear also. So Leon, do you have recommendations for people at the grassroots level, our listeners, us? What can we do to help fight anti-Semitism, to help end it?
Thank you for this question, Evelyn. I think it's a very important question, and of course, you drive me to speak about concrete issues and not my things that seem a bit far away from home. I think first of all, it's important to be informed, to be aware, and to also know what anti-Semitism is and how it manifests itself. For that, I could recommend your viewers to consult the IRA definition on anti-Semitism, to read it, to read around it, because it's important to be able to identify anti-Semitism. Often, it's disguised as anti-Zionism, or in conspiracy myths, or in populist discourse. And if you don't really know what it is, you cannot find it. But once you know the memes or the stereotypes or the comparisons used, you can identify anti-Semitism, and you can be smarter and you can identify it. So I think that's important to know, because anti-Semitism is not anymore "you dirty Jew." It's smarter than that. So it's more fine-tuned. It's more cleverly put. It's not this brute anti-Semitism of the Nazis anymore. So I think it's important for your readers to be able to identify it.
So they should look up the IHRA.
The working definition on anti-Semitism. It's a good start, and of course read more, and has 11 illustrative examples which are part of the definition, which help you a little bit understand the modern contemporary manifestations of anti-Semitism.
Right.
So that I would put as number one. Number two is work with the local Jewish community. If they feel anti-Semitism, if they see anti-Semitism, if they want to be active to fight anti-Semitism, work with the existing Jewish communities, their synagogue, the Jewish Federation, because there they can find other people, they can partner, they can create a network, and they can help each other. Third, I would say report anti-Semitism. So if you see anti-Semitism, report it. If it's online, you can report it to the social media companies. There's a button often under in Facebook or Twitter or all these events to report hateful content.
Yes.
So report the content. Of course, to report it, you have to be, as I said, educated to know what anti-Semitism is, to be able to explain why this is anti-Semitic. But report it to the social media company, but also to the Jewish community or Jewish community institutions that work on, and many countries have many of these institutions that record anti-Semitism. But also there are state and non-Jewish entities, either government or the police or non-Jewish NGOs that do report online hate or offline hate. So it's important to report, because often instances of anti-Semitism go unreported and it's not part of the statistics. So we don't know, we don't have a genuine impression of what's happening if we don't know the incidents, what the events, and the typology of anti-Semitic hate. Last but not least, as you say, it's important to work at the local level. You know, your listeners are living in their communities, the kids go to school, they work in the neighborhood. So it's important to work with the local politicians, the local police, the educators, or the local newspapers, because I believe that every change starts at home, and they can have a greater impact by working with these local people who they see every day than trying to influence the UN or their federal government or things like that. So I really encourage them to find a niche on the local level. They can use tools developed, let's say, by UNESCO or by international organizations, because that gives more legitimacy, more expertise to their work. But definitely try to find a niche locally, work with a local priest, with a local imam, to have a program against hate or for dialogue. All these things I think help. And we here, we're always glad to receive news about good work done on the ground level. And often we highlight that in our work at the United Nations or elsewhere. So everything they do, it's important. And if they can also publicize it, even better, so we can learn about it and use it in our work.
Great. I think that's excellent advice. Educate yourself. Look up the definition of anti-Semitism at IHRA.
We'll include it at the bottom of this podcast, by the way.
We'll include it. And so then you know what is anti-Semitism and what is legitimate criticism of Israel, for instance. Where is the line? Mm-hmm. Make sure to report it somehow, somewhere. You can find many options online where to report anti-Semitism. We have to know, it has to be in the statistics. You can really add value by reporting incidents that you experience or observe, and also get involved with Jewish organizations that fight anti-Semitism, make them stronger with your activities or donations or whatever way you choose. All that is better than doing nothing, right?
Of course, and also, in their discussions with friends and neighbors, if something comes up, they should know how to respond.
Exactly.
Because having the argument. So that's why I spoke about educate yourself, be aware, read the newspapers. For me, that's a basic, but we have to say it because it's not. We shouldn't take it as a given. If somebody says what's happening now, I don't know, in the Middle East or XYZ, they have to know what we're talking about. They have to know to be able to respond.
And as we often say on our show, and how to respond without anger. So if someone literally, Jews who pass as white, and we won't have that discussion right now, but I grew up as the only child in my public school classes in the Midwest. It's easy for someone to say to me, and if someone did in ninth grade, a joke about Jews. At the time, I didn't even know what anti-Semitism was, but to be able to say without anger, you understand I'm Jewish and that's hurtful, and to educate. I always look at those opportunities to educate others, but it takes practice on my part too, not to immediately flare, but instead to respond in a way that the person can hear what you're saying, the other person can hear what you're saying. So,
Phyllis, I understand with you 100%. I believe that if you respond with anger, you lose a lot. The other person will listen to you. The more let's say you keep your temper down, the better you are to access the other person, to engage in a conversation, to be friendly, and to explain to them why what they said is wrong. And as you said, it's hurtful. And sometimes it's even more poignant and more direct than just shouting or being aggressive. I call it the Socratian method of my ancient forefather of Socrates,
Yes.
who engaged in a discussion with people as a way of showing them why they are wrong. And this actually made them more angry than just shouting at them.
Yes, asking questions. Asking questions. If somebody says Israel is an apartheid state and it stole the land of the Palestinians, ask them questions on what they base that information. Have they heard about the rights of Palestinians in Israel and that they are represented in parliament, for instance? So ask questions, and then people have to listen to themselves instead of listening to you. And that's very
100%.
powerful.
I do it all the time. It always works.
Good. Okay, so now it's time for your last words, but we would like you to share with our audience what the three of us were talking about ahead of time about contemporary European history and contemporary European Jewish history. So please share that as part of your last words.
Yes. So a lot of the work we do at the World Jewish Congress, a lot of the work I do working on, let's say, the Holocaust in Greece, but also now I'm helping a lot of researchers and activists all around the world in these topics. I'm speaking to you, like I'm doing a lot of these things, and I welcome every opportunity to engage, is to really speak about the Jewish experience, but also the Jews not only as victims of anti-Semitism or as victims of the Nazis during the Holocaust, but as proud players who have been in Europe for thousands of years, who have had an enormous contribution to world civilization, to culture, to the arts, to architecture, to music, to the science, to business, to what have you, to politics, to society. So I want to see that we are proud and we are stakeholders and we have a seat around the table on all topics. So I try to also encourage this positive agenda, this engagement. When I meet ambassadors, I'm not only speaking about my issues, I'm trying to see what is important for them and what's important on the agenda, and try to see how we can be useful to them and they to us. So it's a two-way street, it's not a one-way street. In that sense, always when I speak, let's say, about the Holocaust, I don't want to speak about it in terms of Holocaust studies or Jewish studies. I feel that you put the Holocaust aside from the mainstream of European history or of world history. So when I did my Ph.D, I always stressed that it's part of contemporary Greek history or contemporary European history, because the Holocaust happened in Europe, the governments and the peoples of Europe were involved, the Jews were victims, but everybody was involved. And if you say it's Holocaust or Jewish studies, and it's not part of modern Greek history, you put aside, and it's not part of the Greek national narrative. But I'm trying to say that no, these are contemporary issues. These are issues that affect everybody. It happened in Greece. It happened with the complicity of Greeks. It happened against Greek citizens who were Jewish faith, but they were Greek citizens. So it should be integrated and as part of the Greek narrative and of the Greek history and of the Greek psyche, and thus also go to Greek schools or to the Greek parliament or to legislation, etc., etc. If it's not integrated, how can you say teach that schools? You know, we had an incident in Greece. In Greece, there is a group of villages they were burned by the Nazis as a form of reprisals, and they have a network of these villages that they call martyr villages. And there was an effort to include Thessaloniki in this network because they also, other than lost its Jewish population, but also the non-Jewish as well. They were executed by the Nazis. And the response was no, because number one, the Jews were not Greek. And number two, the Holocaust didn't happen in Greece, it happened elsewhere. So, also for these politicians back in the 90s, the Holocaust was something distant. Of course, there was an outcry and they reversed the decision in Thessaloniki, and the Holocaust is included in this network. But I'm saying that you start with this a lot with these assumptions, and we shouldn't reinforce these assumptions. We should try to fight to integrate this history within the mainstream.
I will just add that I wrote a Times of Israel blog post because I was very annoyed at a movie that was about the Sonderkommandos uprising in Auschwitz, and they didn't talk about the Greek Sonderkommandos. They made it seem like it was just Eastern Europeans. And so I literally wrote a Times of Israel blog post quoting from the Greek survivor from Auschwitz book. It's got a funny title like A Liter of Bread or something. I'm sure you know which one I mean. And people should realize that the Holocaust happened in Greece and what Greek Sonderkommandos did in Auschwitz. So I just like to—
That's another question within the Jewish world, to find a place for Greek Jewry or Sephardic Jewry within the, let's say, the Ashkenazic mainstream. That's another question. I didn't go there. I spoke about the non-Jewish world, but there is another separate fight within the Jewish world to highlight these topics.
Exactly. So maybe you'll come back and talk about that, because it's something I'm very interested in.
With great pleasure.
Okay, so time to wrap up. To thank you for coming on our show. Thank our listeners. Also, I encourage everyone who hasn't yet seen Evelyn's documentary, Never Again Is Now, to see it. You can see it on Amazon. You can see it on YouTube. Also, you can get more information about my free Holocaust Theater project at thinedgeofthewedge.com. And as we sign off every time, we say, everyone, without putting yourself in physical danger, if you can, speak up against anti-Semitism and hate.